So Star Wars holds like a very cherished place in pop culture history. Unfortunately, despite being like a top tier Hollywood franchise, it has been mostly coasting on that dwindling goodwill for years. In fact, there has not been a new Star Wars film in theaters since the Rise of Skywalker back in 2016. In contrast, Sonic the Hedgehog has released like an entire trilogy of films in that time, with a fourth film on the way. And now Disney is attempting to like revitalize the franchise by, I think, going back to the well of one of its biggest successes. The Mandalorian show is arguably like the pinnacle achievement in the Disney era of Star Wars, and the characters now make their big screen debut with pretty mixed results. Well, I have seen it, so let's talk about it. So I'll say right from the start that I think enjoyment, or lack thereof, of this movie will depend a lot just on expectations. I think The Mandalorian and Grogu offers enough like action-packed spectacle to keep kids entertained, and I think plenty of nostalgic callbacks for like the most die-hard fans. But I personally think this is arguably the worst Star Wars has ever been on the big screen. I think if Disney hopes to revitalize the beloved franchise for future generations, then unfortunately this is not the way. Translating like an established TV show into a blockbuster movie, I think, is an interesting decision, and the result is probably exactly what you might expect: a movie that very much feels like a TV show. Obviously an incredibly expensive TV show, although I think like the digital aliens somehow still look way worse than like anything George Lucas pulled off way back in 1977. But the movie is essentially just two supersized episodes smashed together, and the result is a somewhat disjointed and like episodic story with like a very clear breaking point midway through. Now, that being said, The Mandalorian and Grogu is still enjoyable from a certain point of view. I think by normal movie standards, it's just not a great movie, but Star Wars also isn't just a normal story. Just speaking personally, Star Wars was actually the first live action movie that I ever watched as a kid, and the first that I ever watched as a dad with my own kids. And this is the first new Star Wars film that I've been able to like watch with my sons in a movie theater, which is awesome because I think Star Wars has always been a sort of like generational rite of passage. So depending on like the age and expectations of the viewer, there is enough like fun adventure and like action scenes to keep them fully entertained by it. I'll maybe put it this way, that I didn't like this movie, but I did enjoy watching it with my 11-year-old sons, and they both seemed to enjoy it more than I did. Jon Favreau directed this film, but this is very much the creation of Dave Filoni, who is like the new top dog over at Lucasfilm, and the creator of the really good animated shows The Clone Wars and Rebels. And I think for better and worse, The Mandalorian and Grogu feels like an animated story translated into live action. Because there is like an episodic structure to the story and just frequent action sequences, and this is maybe also like the goofiest and like most kid-friendly Star Wars tone since The Phantom Menace, which may be a positive or a negative depending on what you want. The animated influence is also felt, I think, in a positive way, with just a clear attention given to the visuals, with several like stunning shots that are honestly among like the most impressive in the entire Star Wars canon. Now, it quickly becomes evident that The Mandalorian and Grogu is more a movie made for people who just really like Star Wars than it is for like general audiences, because this is probably the most Star Wars ever crammed into a Star Wars movie. From like prequel era droids to sequel era fan favorite aliens to live action debuts of characters from the animated shows, there are callbacks to almost every iteration of Star Wars. There are even some pretty like deep cuts. Like, do you remember Chewbacca and C-3PO playing like space chess in the original film? Well, those aliens from the game now appear for real, even like recreating moments from that iconic scene. So I think if you just want like a hefty dose of Star Wars, then this film will likely scratch that itch. The flip side of that Republic credit is that, to my mind at least, this is maybe the first like Star Wars movie in which like knowledge of existing Star Wars material is essential. Really not only just the 3 seasons of The Mandalorian, but also the film trilogies. And by that, I mean that the problem is not just that like a Star Wars newbie can't grasp like the basics of the plot, but that the film just doesn't give audiences any reason to care about the plot outside of an almost like desperate tugging on like nostalgic heartstrings. The movie very much like assumes audiences already are invested in things like the politics of the New Republic or even just like the Mandalorian and Grogu themselves. The film plays out like an adventure of the week episode, just told in like movie form as a story I think designed to fit into like the larger context of a show. And so for like any of it to mean anything, you really need to have that larger context. But even as someone who has watched almost all of those previous stories, there was just never like a single moment in this movie where I felt any sort of like emotional attachment to anyone or anything on screen. The film is just not really about anything beyond, I think, just getting Star Wars content back onto the big screen, because there's no clear like objective or journey or like growth of the characters, and the plot itself is entirely like inconsequential to the larger Star Wars universe. I mean, sure, the action is fun and the nostalgic callbacks are amusing at times, but just the whole experience feels pretty hollow and even pointless, as a lot of like spectacle and action scenes strung together without any real soul or like emotional stakes. As far as content I consider, things going on the surface of this, as you would probably hope from a Star Wars film, really nothing here. There is one minor profanity, starting with the letter H, but nothing beyond that. For violence, obviously characters get blasted with lasers or even like torched with a flamethrower, but it is all very kind of tame, standard Star Wars fare, and there is nothing for sexuality either. As far as like themes, worldview, things going on beneath the surface, let's be honest, the main theme in The Mandalorian and Grogu is remember how much you like Star Wars. But I think beyond that, I did like the way the story focuses on like generations and legacy. For example, Rota the Hutt, the son of the evil gangster Jabba the Hutt, wrestles with like living in his father's shadow and not wanting to like continue the legacy of crime and villainy. Although, as a quick side note, I'll be honest, it bothered me probably more than it should that Rhoda continually talks about wanting to be his own man. I mean, like, just look in the mirror, buddy. You ain't no man. But that gripe aside, the theme is also explored, I think, in the relationship between the Mandalorian and Grogu. In the sort of like 2-episode structure of the film, the first half sees the Mandalorian as sort of the protector and guardian of Grogu. Then in the second half, the dynamic is mostly flipped, as Grogu is required to like rescue and protect Mando. And like articulating sort of that film's theme, the Mandalorian makes a statement along the lines of, the old take care of the young, and the young take care of the old. This is the way, which is honestly just a really great moment and message. So in various ways, the film explores sort of the legacy and impact of a bad father in Jabba and a good father in Mando, and just offers a message that the young can, rise above and continue or forge a new legacy, which has really always been an essential message throughout the Star Wars stories. And to me, sort of the clearest scriptural parallel is the dynamic between Paul and Timothy, and the elder sort of encouragement to the younger in 1 Timothy 4:12, where he says, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. So in the end, The Mandalorian and Grogu feels like a movie that is arriving several years too late. It's been 3 years since the show's kind of divisive third season, which I personally thought was just awful, and 6 years since sort of the series was in peak form and like the Baby Yoda craze was in full force. As I saw like with my own 2 kids, I think younger viewers will still enjoy the action-packed adventure into a galaxy far, far away. But for me, I think if Star Wars is going to continue on as more than just sort of a showcase of its cherished past, then it has to return to its storytelling roots that made it beloved in the first place, when it was all fresh and new and exciting, and not just a play to like decades of nostalgia. The series really needs to find a way to like make people love Star Wars again, not just like continually remind them how much they loved it in the past. But hey, I would love to hear what you think if you go see this movie on your own. Maybe you're like me, a Star Wars kid, want some of that sweet, sweet nostalgia, or you're taking your kids to go see this movie. Don't be shy, jump into the comment section. Let's have a conversation about it. If you haven't done so too, encourage you guys, subscribe to the channel, become a collider. I got lots of other movie reviews, got our Faith and Pop Culture podcast, got interviews, just other fun stuff. Love to have you guys be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thanks for watching, stay safe, and continue to collide with your world for Christ.